Hey everyone, this is Lomi, and today's video is all about eyes. One of the most common questions about BJDs is how to insert the eyes, so today we're going to explore eyes in depth. So it may seem pretty obvious, you just take some eyes you like and pop them into your BJD. But to ensure a good fit, you have to know what size of eyes your BJD needs. You can find out by measuring the widest part of a sculpt's eye from the front. For Robin here, that's just about 12 millimeters. So this head needs a 12 millimeter eye at minimum. The maximum size of eye a sculpt can use is determined by the size of the eye well, which I'll show you later. Now, the size of an eye is the width of the whole eye, the white part included. This one I just had in the doll is 14 millimeters. Measuring eyes can be a little fiddly since the measurements are so small, so I like to use a sewing gauge to be as accurate as possible. Eyes most frequently come in even number measurements, so 8, 10, 12 millimeters, and so on. There's more to an eye than just the size though. These two eyes are 20 and 14 millimeters, but the iris is the same size. The eye on the left is what's known as a small iris eye. The one on the right is a standard size. There's one more difference between them too. The larger eye on the left is a low dome eye, while the one on the right is a high dome. This refers to the height of the clear cornea part of the eye. Sculpts that have smaller eye openings may have a harder time wearing high dome eyes, so it's important to know how big that cornea is. A higher dome adds lots of depth to an eye, but that doesn't do no good if it doesn't fit. In my experience, glass eyes are more likely to be high dome, while most acrylic and resin eyes are low dome. Glass eyes are the most light-fast option, which means they won't fade or discolor with time. One common feature on many glass eyes is a stem on the back, which is a remnant from when the eyes were made. This stem can be helpful for positioning the eyes and isn't exclusive to glass, and not all glass eyes have them. Some glass eyes are made with flat backs as well. Acrylic eyes can also have a stem. This is probably the most common type of eye I've come across. They're inexpensive and come in a wide variety of colors and patterns, but they can discolor over time, and I also find them to be the easiest eyes to break. Most BJDs come with acrylic eyes. Acrylic eyes are available in many shapes and sizes. In addition to the full round eyes with a stem, you can also get acrylics with flat backs and as ovals or oblong shapes instead of round, which can be super useful for sculpts that have more realistically shaped eye openings. I made these pairs myself from a DIY kit, which is why they don't look great. I personally use flatback eyes the most. They can be harder to position since they don't have a stem, but I like the extra space it gives me inside a BJD's head. Then there are resin eyes. I also made these and the backs aren't sanded yet, so they're a bit of a mess. Resin eyes are the most diverse eyes available and can be custom made by tons of artisans. They're frequently flat-backed, but some are rounded or have stems too. The biggest drawback of resin eyes is that they can and often do yellow or change color over time. However, for the diversity in size, shape, and design, it's a reasonable trade-off to assume they won't last forever. Now we'll have a peek inside Robin's head. There's some residue from eye putty in there, but you can see the eye wells are substantially larger than the eye openings. It's not unusual for an eye well to accommodate eyes that are 2 to 3 sizes larger than the eye opening. You can see this 16 millimeter eye drops right in, even though it's much larger than what looks best on this sculpt. When using oval eyes, you obviously want to align them horizontally along the wider part of the eye. For sculpts with very small eye wells, these oblong eyes can be easier to move around, which lets you position them in different ways without difficulty. Now, here's a 10 millimeter eye, which is a size smaller than what's ideal. You can get unique looks by using smaller eyes, but you can also see that because the eye doesn't completely fill the opening, there are gaps where you can see in around it. In these gaps, you'd usually see the putty used to hold in the eyes. Using white putty can disguise gaps, but only if the gap is very small. Over the course of your hobby, you may encounter damaged eyes. Don't assume that these are automatically garbage. If you have a favorite pair that gets cracked, be aware that how you position the eyes can disguise damage, or even hide it completely. If I hadn't shown you this one was cracked, would you ever know? An important thing I rarely see discussed is eye putty, which is what's used to hold the eyes inside the head. It's often white or kind of beige like this. I personally like to use poster tack because I live in an area with hot and humid summers, where other putties can soften in the heat and cause the eyes to fall out. Most BJD companies sell eye putty, but not all putties are created equal. Before using a putty, be sure that it's safe for your BJD. You can check by putting the putty on a piece of paper and leaving it to sit for a few days. It should come up pretty easily and leave no marks. This cheap white putty left an oily mark on the paper. This means it's no good for BJDs and should be discarded. Oily eye putty can cause acrylic eyes to crack, and it can soften resin over time too. I've had to scrape softened resin out of BJD eye wells before, and it was not pretty. Now it's finally time to put in the eyes. The easiest way to put in fully round eyes is to make a round snake of eye putty and wrap it around the eye. How much you use will depend on the size of the sculpt, the size of the eyes, and your personal preferences too. I use a lot because even this will soften a bit in the summer heat, so a bigger piece makes it less likely the eyes will fall out. Then you put the eye into the eye well and push it in. The eye putty will squish out around the back, stick to the inside of the head, and then you can position the eye. The stem on these glass eyes makes that super easy, as you can see. This feels pretty good and there's no putty showing. Because of the stem, I can also change the direction the eyes are pointing pretty easily. You can use a putty snake on a flat back eye as well, but I find it's usually easier to put them in by making a flat disc or petal shape out of putty, and then pressing the back of the eye into it. This will go flat into the eye well, which is kind of hard for me to do with my fingernails being long, so it takes me a minute. But once I push it firmly against the eye well, it sticks really nicely. If you're having trouble getting the eye in, or if you can't get it to stick, you can use the back of a pen, pencil, or paintbrush to push the eye into place. This also works well for positioning the eyes. Pushing the bottom edge will tilt the eye upward, pushing the top tilts it downward. Basically, it moves in the opposite direction from where you push. While it's not necessary, you can also flatten the putty around the edges if you like, or press it in a few places to make sure it adheres more completely. No one will ever see this but you, so it doesn't matter if it's pretty. Last of all, let's talk about eye positioning. We've probably all seen BJDs that are just kind of staring straight forward. To make a BJD's eyes look a bit more focused, try repositioning the eyes so the top of the pupil touches the upper edge of the eye. This is how human eyes look most of the time. Of course, going too far can either be spooky or useful, as it changes an expression to serious, dangerous, or can give the sculpt a kind of bad attitude. Different sizes of iris can also affect how they should be positioned, and make a big difference in how your BJD looks. You can get away with putting a much larger iris a little higher. An eye that fills the whole eye opening won't need to be positioned at all, and can give a sculpt a really otherworldly look. There's also pupil size to consider. Larger pupils are softer and friendlier, while smaller pupils tend to look dramatic and intense, and also look more vacant when they're staring straight ahead. But you can use these things to help develop a unique look that captures your character's personality. And that's pretty much all I have to say, so that's all for today. Hopefully you found some of this useful. Thanks for watching. Bye.